Senator John Cornyn, thank you so much. Appreciate your
Jack.
time, as always. I wanted to begin our conversation about the southern border and illegal immigration. You recently led a bipartisan congressional delegation to Mexico, and I'm wondering what came of that?
Well, I wanted to go back to Mexico City to try to learn for myself what the state of play was, particularly with the Mexican government, but just the extent to which the cartels are controlling that country and other issues that they have to deal with that unfortunately show up on our front doorstep. And we spent 4 hours with President Lopez Obrador and his cabinet. I don't know any other head of state who would spend that kind of time with 12 members of the House and the Senate, a bipartisan delegation. But obviously he knew we were interested in learning more, and he was more than happy to share his point of view. Unfortunately, President Lopez Obrador, he frequently mentions the word sovereignty and things that he perceives that the U.S. is doing, which impinges or undermines the sovereignty of Mexico. And we did our best to remind him that sovereignty is a two-way street. We have a common border, and the problems that Mexico has end up on our front doorstep. So we need to work on these together, and neither one can act with impunity or like it doesn't affect anybody else but them.
So what did he pledge, and what does this all mean? In other words, did you have anything concrete come out of that the U.S. would agree to that would prevent what we're seeing at the border and the record number of people crossing into the U.S. illegally?
Well, part of the problem, as you know, is our broken asylum system, because people are showing up at the border from all around the world and claiming asylum. And because the administration doesn't detain people, but releases them into the interior of the country, only to await a court hearing that may be 10 years in the future. This is a huge hole in our legal immigration system that's being abused. And until the Biden administration is willing to address that, it's going to continue to be a huge problem for us. But one area where there was some encouraging news is that he said the fentanyl, which, as you know, is a synthetic opioid made from chemicals largely imported from China to Mexico and then compressed into a tablet that looks like an ordinary pharmaceutical or pill. Unfortunately, that's taken the lives of many of our young people in Texas and across the country. He pledged to do more to try to prevent those chemical precursors from making their way into the ports in Mexico. That would be important if he could do that. I also think what we said is that given the geopolitical competition with China these days and concerns about the way the Chinese Communist Party operates, that there's a lot more opportunity for Mexico and North America when it comes to reshoring some of those manufacturing facilities from China to places like Mexico, that historically, as you know, has been pretty strong with the maquiladoras along the border. A lot of automobile manufacturing takes place on both sides of the border. That could be a great opportunity for Mexico and also for the United States.
And, when you came back from the United States, and you mentioned all the members of the Senate and the House, Republicans and Democrats, is there room for an agreement somewhere? I mean, you and I have talked about this issue for years already, right, and that Congress hasn't been able to come up with anything that's going to pass. Are you there yet?
Well, that's one reason why I was really happy to have this group of members from the House and the Senate, and a bipartisan group that has a history of solving problems and working hard to do some of the stuff that isn't maybe as glamorous, won't always get you on TV, on cable news or the like, but or increase your social media followers. But there is plenty of room for people who are willing to do the work, and I think this group is. But the path, if there is a path, is going to have to start with the House. They're going to have to pass a border security bill. They say that's their intention. And my request of them is to do it as soon as you can. Then it'll come to the Senate. And if anything's going to happen, it will take 60 votes in the Senate. And so the bill will change. And the question is, depending on what that change looks like, will the House accept 80% of what they want? Or will they say, we're not going to accept any changes? That's really the question.
And how soon do you anticipate any movement from the House GOP?
I think the House wanted to move fast, but they're finding they have internal disagreements, and they're having to move through their committee process, which is probably a better way to do it anyway, to get more buy-in on a bipartisan basis to what the legislation says. But my guess is it probably will be another couple months before the House is able to produce a border security bill. But I'm anxious to see what they can do, and anxious to work with them to try to get it passed into law.
I wanted to ask you about the budget. And just this morning, President Biden, the White House released a statement today saying, quote, extreme MAGA congressional Republicans propose handouts to the rich and tax hikes for working families. What's your reaction to that?
Well, that doesn't sound like somebody who's interested in solving the problem. And the president needs to quit calling people names, and he actually needs to do the job he was elected to do. This debt ceiling issue is real. We have to deal with the debt ceiling, but we also historically have dealt with something on the spending side while we were at it. And we know that all the spending the federal government has been doing is aggravating inflation, which is giving people basically reducing their standard of living and causing a lot of financial hardship. So my advice to the president is quit issuing partisan press releases and do the job you were elected to and solve the problem.
Isn't his budget DOA in the House anyway?
Yeah, historically, the budget is really just a statement of the administration's priorities. Most of those are DOA in the House and in the Senate, but they're fine as just a statement of priorities. But the real work's going to happen in the House and the Senate, and I'm anxious for us to get started.
And what would you like to see as far as because he has proposed tax increases on the wealthy and on corporations, and I'm wondering, with the fact that the debt is an issue, and there's been a lot of discussion about spending and Social Security and all that. Where are you on all this? What would you like to see?
Well, as I said, it sounds to me like so far that President Biden and his administration have just been posturing. And, Kevin McCarthy went over there, the speaker, and tried to begin negotiations. There was one meeting, which obviously is inadequate to deal with the problem. But we do have a huge debt, and we are paying $1 trillion a year interest on that debt. And to me, it's a moral issue. We're writing the checks, but our kids and grandkids are going to have to pay the bill. This is not something that's going to be solved by one political party. We're going to have to do this together. But at minimum, I would hope that we would want to save Medicare and Social Security. And right now, they're both going to go insolvent in the not too distant future. So these are hard problems. We need to also maintain, if not increase, our defense spending in an ever increasing dangerous world. And so these are things that those of us who run for office and get elected to office are supposed to work on together, but neither party can do it alone. And certainly the kinds of statements that you read that the administration is sending out is not helping. It's really it's basically making it harder as opposed to doing the work.
A couple more topics I wanted to discuss with you. As you know, over the weekend on Saturday, former President Donald Trump held a rally in Waco, and he said that he seemed to be forcing the issue, forcing Texas Republicans to take sides. And he said Republicans who don't endorse him now shouldn't bother. Where are you on that? What's your reaction?
Well, I don't think anybody responds well to threats. And I just think that President Trump had a good 4 years when it came to policy, but unfortunately, he seems obsessed with trying to relitigate things that happened in 2000 and in the past. So I don't think that's an attractive message that's likely to beat Joe Biden in 2024. I'm interested in winning the election. We need a Republican president and we need a change of direction. We also need a Republican majority in the Senate to work with our Republican House. And we have a great chance of picking up a number of seats, but we also are capable of blowing it if we're not smart about how we approach the election. So I'm not getting involved in presidential primaries. I certainly am doing everything I can to help make sure we get the majority back in the Senate. But I've never seen a situation in all the elections I've observed or been a part of where the voters were motivated to come out and vote based upon what happened in the past. They want to know what your vision for the future is and what you're going to do to make their life better.
So you're going to sit out and not endorse anyone until there's an official nominee?
That's right.
I wanted to ask you on foreign policy. One thing that the former president said on Saturday was that if he's reelected, he would have a deal within 24 hours between Russia and Ukraine. What are your thoughts on that? And what about, how the war is going?
Well, I'm not a fan of the U.S. imposing a solution on the Ukrainians by threatening to deny them what they need to defend themselves. They're the victim of all this, and Russia is clearly the aggressor. And my concern is that they won't stop. Russia won't stop because of President Putin's ambitions to restore the Russian Empire, or at least much of the former Soviet Union. He called the failure of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century. So he's an ideologue. He is a war criminal, and he's not going to stop even if there were a peace with Ukraine. So I'm for continuing to give the Ukrainians what they need in order to defend their country. Putin has strangely, I think, based on his intention, he's unified Europe, and we've seen 2 new additions to NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So he's increasingly isolated and increasingly weak as a result of the attrition of his military. And I don't see any point. Matter of fact, I see some bad that would come out of us trying to impose a settlement when Putin's not going to settle for any kind of peace agreement. He's going to keep coming.
And my last question to you, and I appreciate your time, is what do you make of China brokering a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia? And what impact could that have on the United States, energy policy, energy prices, Middle East peace, et cetera?
Well, I think President Xi is having the time of his life, trying to stick his thumb in the eye of the United States and to question our role as the leader in the world. And it's very strange that, of course, the Saudis and the Iranians would have any kind of settlement of their differences. These have gone on obviously for a long time. And I think this is President Xi's attempt to try to act like the leader of the world, when in fact he has got 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps in his own country. His countrymen, the people who live in China, are essentially living in a police state, and they are rapidly developing the weapons they need in order to threaten our friends and allies in Taiwan and in Asia. So this is a very serious matter, and we can't check out. We need to maintain our leadership role, because as we've seen in Europe and elsewhere, and in Asia as well, the United States, when it leads, other countries will come along with us. But in the absence of American leadership, other countries will fill the void in ways that we're not going to like.
Senator John Cornyn, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jack.